second semester miscarriage of twins last year and have PTSD as a result of it. I have since had another child, and my perception of pregnancy, motherhood, and my life has changed so drastically from losing the babies. I feel like the miscarriage is one of the most taboo topics, but 1 in 4 women has experienced this awful tragedy, and I want to share how I survived the loss and everything I learned from it. So when I read that, I was expecting like a 45-year-old woman. And so to sit across from you today, how old are you?
25 years
You're
old.
25. Me and you are the same age.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
That
I deduced that from like your other episodes. You had mentioned like how old like roughly you were, and I was like, I think we're the same age. I kind of figured it out. Yeah.
I can't imagine going through that type of pain at my age right now. So you are incredible.
So I joined the Navy at 18 years old. I just got out 6 days ago. Served 7 years. 7 years too long.
Well,
No,
thank you
it
so
was a good
much.
experience. Thank you. Glad to be done. I'm married to my husband who just got out of the Navy as well. We
Did you
met in
choose
the
to leave, or
service.
how does the Navy work? Like, do you have to dedicate a certain amount of time and then you're free, or I don't know anything
So
about
when
it.
you sign up, initially your contract is either going to be 4 years or 6 years. And so I did a 4 year contract. My husband did as well. And then we were stationed in Guam separately. We didn't know each other at this point, but we met in Guam. And then we each re-enlisted for an additional 3 years. So we're saying, okay, we'll give you 3 more years of our lives. And then the last 3 years were incredibly difficult.
Mm.
And we decided 7 years was long enough, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to start our new life in the civilian side now.
So where are you located right now? Where did you move to?
I'm in rural Minnesota right now,
Oh, I
way
love
up
that.
north. But I will be moving to St. Paul soon, so I'm
Okay.
getting a good coming back to my roots. This is where I came from.
Okay, cool. So let's just get right into this.
So I had my first son in August of 2019, and then that was like a few months after we got to Virginia, which is where we were stationed. And so he was born in August, and my husband went on deployment January of 2020. And in that time, I would say he'd probably been around our son maybe 6 weeks of his entire life. And he was 5 months old when he left. But because of how much you're out at sea for 2 weeks, then you're in for two, and then you're out for four, and you're in for one. Like he just was never around. And so I'd say he probably knew him 6 weeks in total before he went on deployment. And that was COVID deployment. So everything
Mm.
got extended. It all got crazy deadlines. And so he didn't come home until August 2020 after our son had turned one.
Oh my
And so,
God.
yeah, and we knew we wanted to have these two children pretty close together within 2 years or so, our next child anyway. So we decided to start trying right away. And I just got this super funny feeling one day, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm pregnant. And so I took a test, and it was like right at the dead, like right when I would have been able to test or like, known. And I was pregnant. And it was like 1 week before my 24th birthday. And I was like, oh my God, what a birthday present. Like, I'm pregnant. Like, it's such a good news. And got it confirmed and everything like that. And, things were going along totally normal. And then, so with pregnancy, you usually get two ultrasounds, one at like 10 weeks and one at like 20 weeks. And so the 10-week one is to confirm like the pregnancy is still viable, like, how things are going and when you're due, because that's like when they know. And so at 10 weeks, I had an ultrasound, and she put the wand in my belly for like 1 second, and she goes, you know what? I want to do an internal one just to see. And then within like 3 seconds, she goes, uh-oh. And we're like, uh-oh. And she goes, it's twins. And it was the weirdest feeling because I had like twins, like the idea, the word of it following me everywhere. Like I was reading Little Women at the time, and Meg has twins in it. Spoiler. And I was watching Gilmore Girls for the first time, and Lane had just gotten told she was having twins, and I was like, this is so weird. And then like in the waiting room right before the ultrasound, I was like, how crazy would it be if it was twins? So I had this weird like premonition about it.
Mm.
And she tells me that's twins, and I was like, holy shit. Like,
Oh my God. And then you see on like the ultrasound the two little heads next to each other, and it was like the whole world stopped for us because my husband was there and he was like, holy shit,
What
because
month was this?
his so at 10 weeks you're about 2 months.
I know, but so he came
But
back
you
in August
Oh,
of
yes. This is
2020.
in November. I remember
Okay,
because he
wow.
was wearing shorts in November like a lunatic. But to each their own, I guess. But like I remember they asked me that because they pull you back first, and they're like, "Hey, are you being abused at home?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Okay, so we can get your husband now." And I was like, "They're like, which one is he?" And I'm like, "The only lunatic wearing shorts in November. That's my dude." And so this is like right before Thanksgiving. And I remember telling my therapist I was so scared. Like I was like, what if we find out like the baby is dead and like, I've just been, I've had a miscarriage and didn't know it. And he was like, well then you'll deal with it as it comes, like don't worry about ruining a holiday because you're going through something. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so when they said that there was a heartbeat, I was like, fuck yeah, things are good. Like I'm all, can I swear?
Of course. Oh my
Good.
god. Fuck
Okay.
yeah, all the way.
I do swear quite a bit, so
I
the
swear
whole
quite a bit
adage of
too.
sailors, like, yeah, it's true. And so when they were like, time stopped, and like my husband and I were like, oh my God, what is this? Like, how is this possible? Like, insane. They're like, do twins run in your family? And I was like, well, yeah, I've got a couple cousins with twins, but they were both fraternal twins, so I figured it was like a weird fluke, like you just released two eggs. But then when I tell my dad that I'm having twins, he was like, yeah, I had twin cousins growing up. And I was like, that sure would have been great to know before I started having children.
What was your reaction when you saw that it was two kids?
We were like, oh my God, like this is gonna be like, how are we gonna pay for this? How are we gonna, But we were still pretty happy, It was still like a incredible surprise, because we wanted a baby and we're getting 2-for-1 deal, and we felt really special. I felt really special. To be having twins. And it really explained why I was like unbelievably tired and just like I was showing like crazy, and I was like, this is really, I'm having a pretty big belly for how early I was. Like this doesn't make any sense. So it really explained a lot of things. And then, so that was at 10 weeks. And then I'd come back in a couple other weeks to determine if they were fraternal twins or identical twins. And so we went back in, and lo and behold, they're identical twins. So like I felt so special that not only am I having twins, they're identical twins. Like how lucky. And since there's so many issues,
I can still see you like light up about this, which is, I can't believe the story's gonna go in the direction it is, but like
it'll flip. Don't worry, it's got a good flip to it. Because twins have so many issues, more likely to have issues, I should say. They do a genetic screening to see like how your genetics look, how the babies are looking, because they can tell if they have like Down syndrome or spina bifida now, all that good stuff. And so they test it, and they're like, oh, by the way, this can also reveal gender. That because like you're a woman, like you only have X chromosomes, so if it reveals there's a Y and they're identical twins, you're having boys. I'm like, great. And that was right around New Year's, and my mom was visiting at the time. And so she was like, oh, I want to do a gender reveal for you. So like when the doctor calls, like let me answer the phone. And so she found out, and she got a balloon and she filled it with confetti, and then she was bringing it upstairs to like, so she could pop it over our balcony and like have it rain down on us. She popped it on the stairs in a way that she didn't plan. It was just so goofy, and like we were like, well, it's boys. We're having identical twin boys due June 30th. And so that was that would have been December 31st. 2020. Yeah. And then I went back to work because the holidays were over. It was like January 3rd, I want to say. And I was in a class. And so I was like in a class for work, learning just new skills I needed to have. And it was January 5th that I was 15 weeks. And I had just a routine. So there's baby appointments and then there's pregnancy appointments. You have very few baby appointments just because the baby's not there. It's two. You have two baby appointments, the two ultrasounds. And the rest are just routine prenatal appointments like, what are your symptoms? How are you feeling? Are you gaining the right amount of weight? And so that's what that was. So my husband didn't come to that. It was just, there's no real reason.
Yeah.
And so I went to that one alone, and it was like the last appointment of the day. And because it was twins, I had to have a new doctor because it was now considered like a higher risk pregnancy. And so I met this new doctor. We kind of talked about what was going on and like finished the appointment. And then he was like, oh, by the way, I also would like to do a quick ultrasound just to like, because I'm your new doctor. I want to see what's going on. I just want to check on them. I was like, perfect. I love it. I'm not supposed to see these babies again for like 3 weeks. And so I'm jazzed to get to see them early. Puts the wand on my belly. And he looks around and he keeps looking. And I'm looking on the screen with so much pride. I'm just so jazzed to see him. And he doesn't say anything for a really long time. And I was like, oh, are they giving you trouble? Are they like twisting, like they're just not helping you look for the heartbeat? And then he said the worst sentence, and he was like, I honestly can't find a heartbeat for either. And the whole world stopped. And I just stared at the screen. And then he was like, but I have to have a second doctor legally. I have to have a second doctor come in and look and make sure that I'm not missing something. He's like, so I will be right back. And he stepped out, and I prayed the hardest I have ever prayed in my entire life that the machine was broken. They're in the wrong position. This doctor's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's looking for.
Something had to be wrong with him. Yeah.
This machine glitch, something. Like, God, something else is wrong. That these babies are fine, and he is wrong. And then a minute later, the doctor came in, and my original doctor came and stood by my side, and he held my hand, and we looked on the screen, and she looked for a very long time and didn't say a word and told me she couldn't find a heartbeat either. And I've never been so alone in my entire life. Even the doctor cried with me. The original doctor I had, he stood there and he cried because he felt so sorry for the loss.
Was there any explanation as to why?
No. So, at first, this sounds really terrible, but my first question is it something I did?
Of course.
And I think every single woman who has this experience thinks the same exact thought immediately. Did I do something to cause this? And he said, no, I honestly think that, they had some kind of genetic issue that they knew that they wouldn't survive, and so they self-aborted. And I didn't argue, I didn't question, I just said, all right, I just knew, I'm going to have to tell my husband the worst thing he's ever heard. And I didn't want to call him on the phone. I felt that was too harsh to hear on the phone when he knew he couldn't. He's one of those people who wants to help. And so if I told him on the phone and he couldn't have been there to help, he would have felt even more devastated. And so I kept that to myself. And the doctor was like, so here's how things are going to proceed next. I'm probably going to call you in a day or two to talk about how you want to remove the babies. He's like, we can let it happen naturally, and just hope everything comes out as it's supposed to. If something stays inside, you could get sepsis, you could get sick, you could die, things like that. He's like, I could give you a pill which would force you to dilate, and you would deliver these babies dead in a surgery. Or 3 was, I think he was going to give me just the abortion pill and let it come out the way it was. But the only way to make sure that everything was gone and that I was safe from having, necrotic tissue in me was to have the surgery, which is called a dilation and evacuation. So you hear D&Cs, which is dilation and cutterage, which is typically small surgery to remove smaller babies. But as they get bigger, like mine were, it requires dilation and evacuation because they were just so far advanced. I only had I remember at that second ultrasound where they determined they were identical twins, I asked the doctor, I'm like, what are my chances of miscarrying? And he's like, typically the rule is if you ever get one healthy heartbeat in an ultrasound, you're safe. You have less than a 1% chance of losing these babies. And I was like, that's fantastic, And I didn't just have one ultrasound, I had 4. And they had healthy heartbeats all the way around. So it was a huge shock.
I feel like this is an ignorant and not a great question to ask right now, but I don't know a lot about terms and how far along when children are, roughly what size are we talking about?
I actually have a demonstration for you that.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
I created a box, which I'll go through in a little bit, of all the stuff that I kept of their lives. And so I got death certificates for both of them, and I made little things to hold. So this is roughly how big they were. So it's about the size of a palm, plus a little bit more. And they weighed, I think it was 53 grams each or something like that. So they were very small. They looked like little babies. They looked like babies. They didn't look like, the stuff you see, like, as far as, like, clumps of cells where they look crazy, These were fully formed babies. But yeah, they were roughly about the size of a palm each.
Going back for a second before we get to the surgery, you said that when he told you that there was no heartbeat, you had never felt so alone. I was surprised that that was your first thought, and it makes sense that that was your first feeling, but I'd never heard someone say like that. Can you just talk about that a little bit more, like what that... I mean, the other thing I want to say is you even took on more by not telling your husband right away. Like, you protected his emotions, you protected his reaction, and so you did do it even more alone. And, like, that just shows the kind of person you are. But, wow, that is lonely.
I just felt like, the immediate feeling is like no one in the world could understand this pain. And, nothing is farther from the truth. Every woman I've ever spoken to that told me they had a miscarriage, I feel like an immediate string of their heart in mine. I know exactly how they felt. And just like the feeling of, like, it's over. It's over. And I didn't get a chance to do, because as soon as, like, if it's a wanted pregnancy, I imagine, I don't want to speak for anybody who, is in the situation they don't want to be in. I pictured them rolling around on the floor, chasing their older sibling, and, all of us eating at the table with 2 high chairs next to us, and all of a sudden that dream was dead.
Yeah, you started to plan a life.
All this shit I'd planned is just gone. And all these little faces I picture with the names I was thinking of were for naught. It was just empty dreams at that point immediately. And I wished so badly for my husband to be there. I really did. Because I felt like, even though this doctor was stellar, this doctor that I had was beyond the pale of a fantastic doctor, he could never provide the comfort that I needed.
No. I'm so glad that your husband is the type of man who can provide that comfort.
He is, especially because, I drove home that day, and I don't remember driving home. I just remember yelling the entire drive. I, like, scream-cried in my car the entire drive, and all I wanted to do was call my mom and call my husband. But I felt my husband should know first, and that's always how I felt with anything to do with the kids, is that he should know first before anyone else finds out. And so I drove home, I walked in the door, and he's playing with our son the usual way he does. And he sees that I have no makeup on my face and I look terrible. And within 3 seconds in the door, he asked me what's wrong, and I told him I lost the babies. And his face when I told him haunts me. And, we put our son to bed, the normal routine that we usually do. And that was... I've only seen my husband cry 6 times in the 6 years we've been together. And we both cried our hearts out that night over losing those boys. We talked about how unfair it was and how much we were going to miss them and how loved they are and how just cheated we felt by God. We felt so cheated by the universe, by that doctor who told us, you're safe, don't worry, like, you have a less than 1% chance. The universe cheated me.
Are you very religious?
I wouldn't say very, like, I don't go to church, as I probably, my mother...
No, you're making, but, you're speaking of God and all these things. I mean, I'm not super religious, but so I find it... I'm envious of people who are, to be able to have that fallback of, like... There's a greater plan here there, and I do believe stuff like that. But so I was just curious because in hearing your story, you're referencing God, and it's hard not to be like, who do you point fingers at here? You want to point a finger at someone.
I think you reach for anything desperate. Yeah, you just think someone's got to comfort me. Someone needs to soothe this pain, and who do you think of first as being this person who can just take it all away? And then we felt really guilty. I felt really guilty because I can't even tell you how many times I complained about, how am I going to pay for daycare? I'm going to have to buy a new car because I can't fit 3 car seats in the back of my, a Hyundai Tucson. I can't fit 3 car seats there. I'm going to have to buy a new car. how are we going to pay for food? Like, it's going to be so expensive. And here it was, it felt like I had just, like, the universe was like, hey, you're really worried about it? Don't worry about it anymore. We'll take care of it for you, is how it felt. And, like, it felt like I'd wished it away, and I wished I hadn't.
So you took on guilt.
Immense guilt, which I still have today. And the next day, I took the day off, and that was January 6th. You know, and everything with the
2020?
riot with the Capitol happened.
Oh my God.
21.
21.
And so the riot at the Capitol happened, and everyone's talking about that, and I'm like, I literally can't take that in right now. I do not have the bandwidth to take anything in with that. And people still talk about January 6th, and I'm like, I remember that day very differently. And then I went into a doctor's appointment, and they gave me mifepristone, which I believe is what the drug is called. I should have checked that. But it's the abortion pill, essentially. And it just caused me to dilate, and that takes like 24 hours to set in, because I had surgery scheduled the next day. And so we went in for the surgery. My husband came with me, and they just, like, the Navy hospital that we had made every process so much more painful. Like, the birth of my first son was so painful. This one was so painful. Like, the whole experience was difficult. We got there at noon. We were told the surgery was going to be at 2 o'clock. All of a sudden, there's firefighters running through the hallways because there's a fire in the hospital. And we're like, okay, no worries. Like, you know, things are crazy, but they'll probably sort it all out. This can't be the only operating room in the hospital. They'll figure it out. And hours are going by. So we got there at noon, and like 2:30 rolls around, 3:30 rolls around, and I'm like, am I still going to get seen today? Like, is this going to happen? And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll come back to you. Don't worry. Like, 4:30 rolls around, and we're like, well, we have to pick up our kid for daycare. Like, how long is this going to go? And they're like, well, I think you're going to have to come back another day. And I was like, I don't think that's possible. And that's the first time I really lost my cool, because I was like, no. I have 2 dead babies inside of me. I've already taken the medication. I'm not doing this again. I'm here for today. I'm going to have this surgery today. No ifs, ands, or buts. And immediately the room changed because they realized why I was there. Within an hour, I was in surgery, and, you know, they give you the memory loss drug, so I have no memories of it. I was knocked out. They intubated me, the whole thing. And then I woke up, and some doctor was standing there, and I was like, are my babies gone? And he said yes, and I cried as hard as I could. We didn't get home until like 8:30 that night or something like that. So my son was already in bed. And then it was just time to heal. It took like 6 weeks to heal from the postpartum loss, and I had 2 weeks off from work. Yeah. I had 2 weeks off from work to heal, and I just...
2 weeks, that's all they gave you?
I was lucky to get it. I know a lot of people in the Navy who didn't get any time. And I just basically haunted my house for 2 weeks. I didn't feel like a real person. I just kind of drifted around. I wasn't eating at the time. You know, my son would go to daycare and he'd come home, and I wouldn't interact with him because I was just so heartbroken and so lost. And then 2 weeks, they had a postpartum visit where I'd go and see the original doctor who did the surgery. And he told me that they did an autopsy on the corpses and on the placenta, and everything came back normal. So there was no reason as to why they had died. They had no reason. And then he offered for me to see them. And this might be too graphic. If you don't want to hear anything graphic, tell me, and I won't. You can always cut this out of the podcast too, because it's pretty intense. But
I'll do a trigger warning. I want you to be as honest as possible.
He's like, would you like to see them? And I said, before I see them, I'd want to know what they're like, because I know that second trimester losses, like, they take on a lot of damage in removal because you're essentially delivering dead babies. And so I was like, I need you to detail exactly what they're going to look like so I can prepare myself.
Hey guys, it's me again. I am interrupting this because Emily decided that we should cut the graphic detail of what her babies looked like. And now we will pick up again right after those details were shared.
The only thing I remember from that was I dug my fingernails into my thigh so hard that I was cut. When I got home, I looked at it and I was like, I cut myself because of how hard I was gripping when he was telling me that. And I confirmed with my husband because I wanted him to have a say as well. And we both decided that we did not want to see them, but we would like their remains. And so we had them cremated and we picked them up like a week after they were cremated. And they've been with us ever since. And that's when I started putting together my box full of everything for them. I guess it's pretty much the end story of them. But then after I'd healed, we decided to try and have another one because we still wanted to have a baby. And 2 months later, I got pregnant again on Mother's Day
Oh my God.
of 2021. And, so much relief, but equal parts fear.
Terrified.
Yeah.
I'm terrified for
And
you.
They told me he was due January 16th. And this next baby. And
Before we get to that, where was your mental state?
I don't remember anything from January to April of 2021. It's all blank. I have no memories of my son during that time. I don't know what I was doing or, anything about myself or what was going on in the world. That time is just gone.
Were you diagnosed with postpartum?
No. I was seeing a therapist at the time. I ended up going in between therapists at that time. Terrible timing, but...
Yeah, but you gotta find the right person, especially during something like that.
Yeah. And he was not it. So I had to find a new person.
I can't imagine seeing a male therapist going through such a female.
And that's what caused me to be like, I gotta find someone else. This is not it. I need to find someone specialized in this kind of loss.
Good for you.
And I ended up doing that, so that was good. But yeah, that time is just gone. It's gone from my memory. I have no idea what was going on. And I feel terrible that time is just erased. I look at my phone at pictures I had taken, and I have like 8 pictures during that 4-month window. And I'm like, God knows, like, I'm never going to see my son at that age again. But I can't remember it.
I mean, I'm sure you hear this a million times, and it's so not my place to say it because I'm just supposed to listen. But, oh my God, Emily, I just want you to give yourself so much grace for that time. You did everything
I try. I'm also
you could.
my harshest critic you'll ever meet. I'm the harshest critic of myself.
I know, but oh my God, you're a powerhouse.
The second pregnancy the pregnancy after was the really fearful time of my life.
I'm sure.
I spent the entire time so scared and not really believing he was ever going to be real.
I'm sure.
It always felt... I'm so sorry. I keep sniffling. It's going to ruin your audio.
No, my God. Sniffle. Just cry all you want.
So then I was pregnant. I found out on Mother's Day. And then I spent the next 9 months terrified and not believing this baby was going to be real. Because he just didn't feel real to me. He felt like this hypothetical child that might be someday, and here I am growing and like people are showing me on ultrasounds he's doing great, he's a really big baby, he's and I just couldn't believe it. And then I got to like 33 weeks pregnant and I was looking at my house and I'm like, I'm not ready for a baby, holy shit, like I gotta step into gear and start getting stuff together. But like my first ultrasound, my husband was underway again, so he wasn't around. And my sister-in-law was gone at her own, like, doctor's appointments. So I asked my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, like, would you come to this doctor's appointment with me, please? I cannot go alone. And this poor guy came with me. He's, like, 21. No business, like, no idea about what pregnancy is like or anything. And I'm like, I just need you to be in the room with me. I can't do this alone.
Good
and
for
he came
you knowing
with me.
what you need.
And then at my 15-week routine appointment, I made my husband come with me because I was too nervous. And I was like, I need you to do an ultrasound today. I need you to do it to soothe my fears about this. And when they showed me a heartbeat was still good, I still didn't believe them. It just didn't feel real. But, as we're getting to the end towards the due date, things are looking like they're starting to go south. Like you're starting to have all these health issues, we think you're going to have this baby early. And my whole goal was to not this baby after New Year's, but not on January 7th. I could not have him share an anniversary of the death of the twins for his birthday because it's too much. It's asking too much of my being. I can't do it. And so I just begged for him to hold on until past that date. And he made it to January 10th. So thank God he doesn't share the dates. Have a healthy baby, and he's doing great. Um, but his early life is soured.
Yeah.
Because all I think about when I look at my one baby is that there's supposed to be another one beside him. And they were due June 30th, 2021, so they'd be about a year old at this point. And so I'm like, yay, this beautiful baby I have that loves me so much, that I love so much, and it's just a perfect addition to our family. But I think about the two little babies that were supposed to be here. I don't, my pregnancy was not a joyful thing for me. It was just a very fearful time. And so, like, I honestly believe, these babies died inside of me. And I think a part of me died with them. The part of me that was excited about pregnancy, the part of me that was, joyful without abandon, that just was so enthusiastic about, all these aspects of my life is gone. And what's left is a person who's very reserved and, I'd like to say don't take things for granted, although I probably still do in some aspects, but I'm a very different person. And I feel bad that my children will never get to know that part of me that was, bubbly and enthusiastic. And I still can be those things, but I don't think it will ever be to the level it was before the twins.
Yeah, when you talked about your pregnancy with the twins, that light in you came out. Like, it's in there with them, you're right. Somehow the three of you are connected.
And I plan to be buried with them. I have their ashes in the world's smallest urn. I wanted to have a special urn made for them. And I needed it to be engraved, I thought. And it was one thing that gave me a lot of peace when that happened. It was the first thing they saw when they opened their eyes was the face of Jesus. As desperately as I wanted it to be my face or my husband's, they weren't alone when they died.
I feel like, when I've heard similar stories of miscarriages, some mothers have this view that then their next child is those like those spirits and all of that. And it doesn't seem like you look at, you've individualized your new child from these two kids. It doesn't seem like to you they're all in one, right? You really do separate.
I do believe that. Yeah, I don't think it's fair to put on him the loss of his brothers. I don't think that's, a way to consider them all together. I do think the two of them together, I do consider them as one unit, because they were together their entire existence. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to the youngest to be like, well, your brothers are with you. Like, I think it's just too big of a burden to carry for anyone growing up. I plan to not talk about the twins too much to them as they grow up. I just don't want them to carry my sadness. I want them to grow up with the, reckless abandon of childhood where everything is new and exciting. And I don't want them to carry sadness for things that will never be. Everything from after that changed my perspective on motherhood, on, pregnancy, and, how things are handled with miscarriages, because, 1 in 4 women have them. And I remember after it happened, I reached out to my cousin's wife, because she was due with a baby at the same time I was pregnant with my first. And she lost her baby, and I kept mine. And I remember not wanting to talk about babies in front of her, because I felt like it would hurt her too much. And, and then when I lost mine, I reached out to her, and I said, when does it get better? When does it get better? Because it felt like it was never going to happen. It felt like I was just going to live in that pit forever. And she ended up sending me this letter all about it's the shittiest club to join, but you're in this club now, and you have so many members here with you that, like, they feel your pain, they feel your sorrow, and they loved your babies as much as you did. And she sent me a little ring to go with me to remember them by, and it was that every twist and turn has its purpose. that I wore for a short period of time. But I thought that her should be honored with the twins.
Yeah.
And so reaching out to her gave me a lot of strength. My mom had one as well, but she was like, it was 40 years ago. I don't, I think about him, so I really think about the baby every so often, but it's not like as big of a part of my life anymore. And so
When you hear that, does that scare you or excite you that you'll be like, I could see that going two ways hearing that. Like on one hand, it's like, am I gonna forget these two?
No, I never feared that.
I know. Okay.
I think it's that you will always grow around your grief. Losing them gutted such a large part of my heart. But and the grief takes up so much part of my life. But my life has had to grow around this grief. It can't just stay in there. Mm-hmm. It had to grow. My life had to grow to absorb my youngest into my life now. It has to grow to be excited about these new changes in my life. And so the grief never got smaller. I just had to grow around it. And I just, I think we really need to change the way that we talk about it, because it sounds like people, either people went one of two ways when they heard about what happened. Either they would say things like, it's God's plan, it was just meant to be, and I even said these things beforehand. And if my friend Bates ever hears this, Bates or his wife, please know how deeply sorry I am. But back then when they had a miscarriage, I was like, oh, thank God you hadn't told anybody, like it'd be so hard to tell everybody that you lost the baby. And now I think of what a dumbass thing to say. What a terrible thing to say. I feel awful thinking about it. So people either went that way or they didn't say anything. They acted like my babies never existed, like I never went through this. And I think people do that to avoid causing more pain because they don't know what to say and they don't want to say something that would hurt me. But acting like they never existed broke my heart constantly.
Yeah. So what is the language you'd like to see in this world around it? How do you think women could be, what would you have wanted to see from your peers in the community when you were going through this?
I had one friend who handled it in a way that I thought was exactly what I needed. I can't speak to anyone else, but what I needed is I wanted to talk about them. I wanted people to acknowledge that they existed, that they lived, and that they were loved, and that they weren't just, a weird taboo topic they shouldn't know about. He just sat there and he listened to everything I had to say about them. And I was like, yeah, I got their ashes back. And he was like, oh, you had them cremated? Like, what are your plans with their ashes or whatever? It was just like, he didn't say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear this. Like, thank God you didn't tell anyone, or it's God's plan. Because it's all just empty, How could it be God's plan to give me this terrible heartache? How could it be, what did I do to deserve this? Like, how come I had to go through this versus everyone else? He just sat there and he listened. He'd ask me very simple questions about them, Like, he'd ask me how big they were, and I would answer. But I think that everyone would have to answer I know other people who are like, I don't want to talk about it ever again. But I wanted to talk about my babies. I didn't want to act like they were just this weird blip in my life that is too sad to talk about. Because they were my babies.
There's also a military mental health stigma that like everyone in the military is very tough and that, you're not going to talk about things, and people have PTSD, it's like, don't bring it up around them and things like that. And to see that you are someone to go through pain, which so many people not in the military don't even do, let alone in the military, and, look at it right in the face versus go around it. You are the epitome of someone who's feeling their feelings, which is the greatest strength of all. But I don't know. I just want to say how incredible that is.
It's also a male-dominated area, and so
yeah,
I was dealing with a lot of men who were like, cannot relate to this in any way. Like, don't understand it.
How did your husband deal with it? I mean, you don't have to go too much into it if you don't want, but I'm just curious, like, how have you guys gone through that as a couple? Because you got married so quickly too.
I was terrified that we were going to end up divorced because, most marriages that children are lost end up in divorce because it's just so hard to try and rebuild your life after that. But luckily, nothing like that ever happened. It was never even suggested. We never really went through any hard times after it. I do think it brought us closer together, but a lot of his perspective was there's nothing I can do to change it. So, like, why just wallow in the sadness of it? He still feels it. You know, we talk about it every so often. He's like, yeah, I was driving home and I thought of them. Anytime we talk about them, we usually cry together, you know, thinking about them and how, like, he says that's the one thing in his life he can't make any sense out of.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his own trials, and he's like, yeah, all of that stuff was to make me tougher, all of that stuff, but I can't understand the twins lost. I'm like, me either. Like, but he didn't really want to talk about it too much. And that was hard for me, but that's like where therapy came in handy. So I had
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say,
But a
like,
lot of
talk
his
about the
perspective was like,
lonely.
I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. He wanted
Kind
to
of
just,
what we
like,
were saying.
yeah, let it go, and, you know, he can't fix it, so, like, he doesn't want to feel sorry about it all the time.
I hope that, and this is probably out of place to say, but I hope that you do talk about them with your kids as they grow up, because it's such a part of you. It's such a part of their mom. It's such a part of the pain that she's gone through and the strength of it, too. And I think if you harbor it, they'll feel that versus talking about it.
Maybe when they're older. I just don't want them to be like, I mean, I do have the box out in display in our house.
Good.
And so, you know, if they ever ask me questions about it, I can answer it, you know. But yeah, I don't want it to be like, yeah, talk about their two brothers that aren't here too much.
You're so cautious of everyone else's feelings around all of this.
Yeah, it's probably something
But
I
I
need to
feel
work
like-
on in myself.
I mean, I think that just, yeah, that's the kind of person you are, which is an unbelievable thing. I mean, you dedicated the first part of your life to service to begin with. You went on the water. Literally, the idea of going on a cruise boat makes me want to jump out the window right now. Like a luxury cruise, let alone I'm sure you've been like on a submarine or on a boat overnight. I mean, I just can't even wrap my head around that.
Yeah. I actually, weirdly enough, never went on a boat. The way it worked out, yeah. So I went overseas, and so that counted as like my sea time. And then we got married. The Navy's policy that if you're dual military, if both of you are in, one person's going to go to sea and one person's going to go to shore in case you have children, so you have someone around to take care of them. And my husband wanted to go to sea, and I wanted to like start a family, so I went to shore. And so I spent 7 years in the Navy, never been on a boat. It's kind of it's hard to call my husband says you're not even a sailor, like you've never been on a boat. And I was like, I know, but
In your training though, did you have to be on a boat?
no, they just like boot camp. They treat it like a boat where like you just never really go outside and stuff like that. But you don't really like no overnights.
Oh my God. I could never do so much of what you guys have done, and especially what you've just gone through. And I just want to thank you, Emily, for feeling safe enough to share this here, and for feeling like you want this to be a public story. And I'm already so excited for the amount of women that I know are going to watch this and go, oh my God, I feel seen.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I learned from it is that if this baby is wanted, celebrate it. Don't wait until you're out of the first trimester. You know, not to say that you're never safe, but if this is a baby you want, you tell everybody. You tell them how excited you are, like where you're at, and you know, you celebrate that baby from the moment you know about it. If this is what you want, don't wait. Don't postpone joy and all that, because you know, you're never like, you shouldn't wait to tell people about it, because God forbid something does happen, you'll have that many more people standing next to you to lean on when you need them. And then talk about your babies, talk about your lost ones. Like they're not lost, you know. Every baby that's been lost to a miscarriage, I have loved them. Even though I'll never know their mothers, I'll never know them. Like, those babies are loved and they are missed, and I think everybody should talk about them, because 1 in 4 women you know have lost them. And that's what's even more scary with the whole Supreme Court change, is that, you know, technically I've had an abortion.
If this were today, like, you know, after last week's decision, would you have not been able to have the babies removed? Like, how would that work?
I don't know how that would work, because I know that technically in my medical record I've had an abortion, because I had the drugs and I've had them physically removed from me via surgery. I'm not sure how that would be documented, you know, as far as like legal now, but it does scare me because it's still considered an abortion, you know, and as far as like OBGYN records, I've had 2 live births and 1 abortion. Even though it wasn't an abortion that I chose, it was a miscarriage. They died on their own. But, you know, and that's the kind of stuff that scares me. You know, I had all the medical resources in the world. I still lost these babies, and it's documented as an abortion. And even if I didn't want them, I shouldn't, you know, I would have found a way not to be pregnant. It's just the most scary time in the world. I can't even, like, my husband is so tired of, like, how many times I bring it up a day, but I just can't stop thinking about
No,
it
I'm
and
so glad
how
that you're bringing it up. I mean, I
future
think the
generation, I
scary.
don't know how it's going to work. It's just too terrifying to
No,
even
and the other
believe.
thing so much about this decision that I've been confused about is like fallopian tube pregnancies. What are those called? Ectopic or
Ectopic, yeah.
something like that. Now, I mean, those are all under this too, you know? I think that we all need to open our minds to really what abortion is, bigger than, you know, what it's stigmatized to be, because as you just said, yours are documented as that, even though these were two very wanted children, and
And I
you were.
needed, I mean, I chose that surgery because I didn't want to gamble my health, my life. Or, you know, I was like, well, how long would it take for them to naturally be expelled on their own? He's like, it could take weeks. And the idea
And
of
who knows the
carrying
complications of
around,
that, yeah.
yeah. I mean, like he's like, there's a possibility that something could be left behind, and that's dead tissue you're walking around with. Plus, it would have delayed me getting pregnant again because it would have taken so long for them to be expelled. And this was a safe way to make sure that everything was removed. Plus, it gave me a chance to, you know, have the autopsies done, dig
Yeah, I
further
didn't even
into
think about
why they
that.
died, even though nothing came of it, and, you know, and that they were still perfectly healthy and there was no reason that they should have died. Oh, I added one. I wanted to add one more thing about
Please.
if you have this, if you have a miscarriage, it's not your fault. In my logical adult human brain, I know that I did nothing to cause this miscarriage. I know that I couldn't have changed anything. But that same brain wonders if maybe that one time I didn't have McDonald's because I was too tired to cook, that could have made all the difference. Maybe if I'd taken that nap when I really needed it, could have made the difference. And that's one thing about the stages of grief that I think is complete bullshit, because I think I will be in one stage, I think I'll be in the stages of grief about this for the rest of my life. I bounce around between the stages all the time. Um, the bargaining stage. I remember even right before the surgery, I was like, you know, maybe that machine was broken. Maybe that one machine that I had the ultrasound on was broken. I should ask them to do another ultrasound. And then I think back on it, I'm like, those babies were still during that ultrasound. They didn't move. They were gone. Like, don't bargain with yourself and think like maybe it was possible. They were gone. And then I'll go through stages where I'm so angry at the world that this happened and how much I've had to suffer from it, like how unfair it is. Uh, and then I'll go through loss and sadness, and then I'll feel acceptance about it. Like I've felt acceptance about the last few days, but I know that I'll be on TikTok and someone will talk about their twin boys who are a year old, and I'll think of mine and I'll be right back in it. Or I saw somewhere that 2021 was the highlight year of twins, but my twins of 2021 didn't get to be. So it's things like that. I truly believe that the stages of grief are bullshit. You'll go through them over and over and over again, and just know in your brain that it's not your fault. It can't be your fault. It's these things happen without reason. And my case is a perfect example of there was no reason. And there's no comforting words about that. It's just the way it is. And all you can do is grow from it and learn from it and know not to say terrible things like, oh, thank God you didn't tell anyone. Now you know that, you know, the things you say and don't say matter through this situation.
Thank you so much for sharing this story here. Thank you for
Thanks for
letting me
having me.
listen. Thank you for letting us all listen. Oh my God. I feel so weird and like I shouldn't ask you the final where's your favorite place to eat question that I ask everyone.
I have thought about it because
Okay,
I knew this
please.
question was coming. So I just left Virginia Beach, Virginia. There's actually a Route 58 delicatessen in Virginia Beach that ships in its like corned beef and like cheesecakes from New York, and it's stellar. Um, I got to get to know St. Paul before I can answer that about St. Paul. But here
Do you know the name of the place in Virginia?
Yeah, Route 58 Delicatessen.
Oh, it's called that. It's not on Route 58.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They just gave it some goofy name. As far as up north here, the Village Square in Walker, Minnesota is where I like to eat.
Okay.
But
if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and follow the podcast wherever it is you listen to it so that we can bring you more unexpected stories by ordinary people. And if you didn't like the episode, forget what I just said and just please don't tell anyone. Do you have an unexpected story to tell or know someone who does? We'd love to have you on the pod. Please apply at pleasedon'ttellanyonepod@gmail.com or follow our application link in bio of our Instagram, Please Don't Tell Anyone Pod, or TikTok account.